Magnum XL-200 is a steel hypercoaster that opened at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio in 1989. Ever since it opened, it's gone through quite a few changes in terms of the mechanical aspects of the ride and a couple of layout changes, but overall it's remained relatively the same ride ever since it opened in 1989. Magnum has been praised over the years, especially recently, for being an absolutely awesome ride and one of the best rides at Cedar Point. I used to disagree with this statement, thinking it was one of the weaker rides at Cedar Point. I found it rough and just overall not that good. But something changed when I got a re-ride in 2021, and in this video I'm going to be discussing why Magnum XL-200 is such an insane ride. First, I'm going to go through the layout of Magnum to give you an idea for what the ride is like. Magnum is located on the right side of Cedar Point, pretty much right in the middle of the park. It winds up running alongside the beach which borders Lake Erie, so you get some absolutely incredible views from this ride. Going down its 200-foot drop, you get a pretty decent amount of airtime if you're sitting in the back row. The first hill is probably one of the weakest elements on the ride for the fact that it doesn't really do much, but if you're sitting in the back row, on the way down, there's like a weird turn in the middle of the drop for that hill that for whatever reason just absolutely throws you. It's one of the weirdest parts of the ride, but it's very fun. From there, you go through a tunnel and go up into a floater airtime hill. When the ride first opened, this hill was a lot more aggressive, specifically the drop down, which you can see from this clip. It absolutely flung riders down and really slammed you back into the ground hard. But a couple years after the ride opened, it was changed so that the element was a little more graceful, but that also allows for the transition into the turnaround to be really weird, but also really fun. As you can see here, Magnum curves prematurely and actually winds up banking while you're flattening out, which makes you get thrown to the side as you go through this turnaround. If the trims are off, the ride is absolutely insane through this turnaround, but the trims really aren't off all that often except for during ERT. Even when the trims are on, this element is very fun as you get some pretty solid positive G-forces going through the turns. But after that is where you get into where the ride really picks up steam. You first start off with the floater airtime hill in a tunnel, which is pretty fun, and then you curve around the ride structure so that you can prepare yourself for the finale. The finale consists of 3 airtime hills that progressively get more and more insane. This is seriously some of the strongest ejector airtime I think I have ever experienced in my life. The reason for this is the fact that the hills are actually triangular shaped, meaning that you fly up and then curve right back down at a very steep angle. It's kind of hard to explain, but when you see the hills, you'll notice that they're definitely very differently shaped as opposed to a ride like Millennium Force or Steel Vengeance. These hills are very aggressive, and you feel the train go absolutely flying up and then slam back down. When you're in the front row, you definitely feel the strength of these hills a little more, but in the back row, which is my personal favorite row on the ride, you really feel the sustained part of the airtime, which is just absolutely great. This ride has a lot of airtime, and you feel it big time. From there, you're going to go into the final tunnel, which has audio effects and lighting effects, which is really cool, especially when you're flying through there at night and all you hear is like a bunch of crashing sounds. You don't really know what's going on before you slam into the brakes. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the ride either runs with its trim brakes on or with its trim brakes off. This is similar to a ride like the Voyage at Holiday World, where the ride can be very different whether it's trimmed or not trimmed. But unlike Voyage, which I'll talk about in another video, Magnum is excellent with the trims on or off. When I rode it during Coaster Mania at Cedar Point in 2021, the trims were off on 1 or 2 of my rides at night, and wow. I can see why they don't run it with the trims off normally because it was going way too fast. I grayed out in that turnaround, which really isn't necessarily the strongest thing in the world, but with the trims off, you go so fast through that element, it's actually unbelievable. The airtime hills at the end of the ride, they flung me out of my seat even more so than they usually do with the trims off, which was just absolutely insane. So overall, Magnum XL-200 is a really, really great ride, and you definitely got to give it a couple chances before you can start to say whether you like it or not. Like I said, when I first rode it in 2018, I think I rode it in the second to back row, which is a pretty good row on the ride, and I just did not like it. And the year after, I rode it again in 2019, I didn't like it even more. The problem I had with the ride at that time was the fact that it was too rough to enjoy. Now, this ride is definitely not the smoothest thing in the world. It's from 1989, and it's built by Aerodynamics. If you know aero coasters, you know that they're not necessarily the smoothest things in the world. They're made similarly to wooden coasters, where they're not really designed with computers. They're kind of just made on the spot, and it doesn't always work out the right way, and you can definitely feel that with Magnum, because it feels a lot more like a wooden coaster than it does a steel coaster, as strange as that sounds. The way that the transitions are, and just overall the ride is shaped, feels more handmade as opposed to computer made, like a ride like Millennium Force or Maverick, where it doesn't really feel rough or janky or anything. It feels perfect. Magnum does not feel perfect. It has a lot of strange aspects of the ride that really do make it very, very interesting from both an engineering perspective and a riding perspective. Another common complaint with Magnum is the lap bars, and I can definitely understand this complaint to a certain degree. This ride uses lap bars that are not really that well padded, and they also kind of grab you. It's really weird to explain. It's the same restraints on Gemini and some of the other Mine Train coasters, where they come down very quick and they kind of push a little bit, so you kind of have to hold it up throughout the ride, but it's really not that big of a deal. If you do get stapled though, it can be a little painful, but then again, it's really not too bad all things considered. There's definitely worse restraints out there. Another great thing about Magnum, especially when compared to the rest of Cedar Point's coasters, is that this thing pretty much never has a line. If you've been to Cedar Point, you would know that that place is always packed. It is very difficult to find a day where most attractions have a wait below 30 minutes or even below an hour sometimes. The park gets very crowded very fast at almost every ride. Keyword is almost, because Magnum is one of the rides that tends to not really get that bad of a wait from when I've been there. When I was there in 2021 in June, I was there on a Thursday and Friday. Thursday the ride was closed, but on Friday it never had a wait. The longest wait was maybe like 2 minutes, and it was in the station just waiting for a row. All other times it really just was no wait at all, which is really, really good considering the fact that if you don't have fast lane at Cedar Point, it is very difficult to get on any rides without waiting a while. And it's good to know that Magnum is one of the rides you can pretty much just hop right on at any point throughout the day. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I have to say about Magnum XL-200. As for the answer to the question why Magnum XL-200 is insane, it's the airtime. The airtime on this ride is absolutely nuts. And if you're at Cedar Point, this ride, in my opinion, is definitely a must ride. But that's going to conclude this video on Magnum XL-200. If you guys agreed, disagreed, or enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Colin from Collywood Studios, and I will see you all in the next video.